My guest today is Steven Garrett. He's a pastor in Alabama. He's a father of five, a fatherhood advocate working in maternal health, which is to say, his work starts before the kid is born. He grew up in a Detroit barbershop watching a father who could afford the world and couldn't keep the lights on. While growing up, a man told him a sentence that redirected his life. Steven spent the years trying to be that sentence for someone else. Today, we're going to talk about what he inherited, what he chose different, and what's getting passed down to his kids watching him do it. Steven, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here today, and we're so grateful for the opportunity just to share a little bit about our story today.
I'm looking forward to getting into it. So I want to start in that barber shop. And before, you told me a story about being a young man in your dad's barber shop, and it's a room full of men complaining about their wives, calling them balls and chains, except one man pulled you aside and told you something different. So take me back there. What did he say that the others weren't saying? Take me back to that room. What did he see in you that the others didn't? And here's the harder question. What would have happened to you if he hadn't have said anything?
So, Jeff, I've had the privilege of growing up around many inspiring men, but taking you back to that day, I remember just one of them barbershop conversations, and the young man I was hearing all these guys kind of just complaining about their wives and all of these different things that they go through as men, and they did not paint marriage as a beautiful picture. And there was a young man, older gentleman, that was sitting off in the corner. He really wasn't saying anything. And as I was listening and hearing, after he got done with his haircut, he got up and he pulled me to the side and said, "Young man," and I had a unique name back then. Everyone used to call me Little T because of my big brother. We looked just alike. And so he said, "Little T, let me talk to you for a quick moment." I said, "What's going on, sir?" And he said, "I know you heard all those guys complaining." He said, "But I want to share with you that marriage was the best decision that I ever made in my life." And he shared with me not only that marriage was one of the best decisions he ever made, he shared with me that what you see sometimes is those that are complaining, and what you don't hear are those who are celebrating. And so in that moment, it painted a different picture for me, because I saw a young man who had a pivotal point where he could make a decision of if he was just going to complain about something or if he was going to choose to celebrate that thing. And this guy came to me and poured something into me that shifted my life, because from that moment on, I knew when I got married, I wanted others to audibly hear how beautiful marriage could be, because it appeared that the side that was not as beautiful, not as pleasant, was the one that was being presented to the world on a regular basis. I would always hear from guys in the barbershop about ball and chain or the responsibility or the hardships of man, and you didn't really hear about the benefits of marriage. But that day, someone shared with me privately something that I would take in the future to share with others publicly.
Before he spoke to you, was there already a part of you that was starting to agree with that room?
I don't know if there was a part of me that agreed with it in that room, because I had the privilege of having people around me already that they looked happy. They didn't talk about their happiness, but they looked happy. And then I still have a phenomenal relationship with my mother. But I did, and I guess this is where I would say it impacted me. I did wonder if marriage created the problem. Like if you could be happy before marriage with the person, and then when marriage showed up, was that when the problem started? And so there was a small part that was wondering, is the reason that a lot of people are having these issues. And remember, I was just 15 years old, so I didn't really know too much. But there was a part of me that pondered, is it because when people are living life or doing life together, that's when the problems start?
Have you ever been that quiet man for somebody else?
I've had the privilege of being that quiet man for many guys. For years, I was in the barbershop cutting hair in my own barbershop. And when I was able to take on that, what happened was I would have guys that would visually see me and my wife's relationship and become confused. I remember one particular day, my wife came in and she was I'd been cutting hair all day, and she brings me a full plate of food. I hadn't said anything, but she knew I hadn't left, and all the guys in there, packed house full of guys. Like, man, Steven, how do I get this as a wife? I said, you have to become who I am as a husband. I said, this is a two-sided tale. I said, we do not get to just get the beauty of the person who is loving us without also loving that person. And so I was sharing with them a lot of the nuances that made us to what they believed was unique, that really was a formula that I've discovered many marriages that are successful have. And that is that give and take, and both sides must sacrifice.
Why didn't your own father tell you about the ball and chain thing, or did he? And that was just the story that stood out to you.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think because you can't teach what you don't quite know yourself. I've had the privilege of hearing my dad's story, and my dad did not have the easiest story in life. So it's hard when no one else pulled you aside and had that conversation with you. My father met his father at 18 years old himself, and not because his father did not want to be present, but because life happened, rural South, and he was adopted. Now, that being said, my dad did not grow up in the easiest of environments. And because my dad did not grow up in the easiest of environments, I believe he could not share with me what he really didn't understand himself. And so I have had the privilege of talking to him, learning his story while he was still living, and hearing the pain of that story. So I think the reason that he couldn't share it with me, because he didn't know how to paint that picture for me. And there was a requirement to respect my mother that he shared, but there wasn't showmanship of how to respect my mother that he could share.
Showmanship of how to respect your mother. What do you mean by that?
So when my kids see me, they see what it looks like to show love, care, and experience just that deep connection with my wife. And I'll share a small story. Happened years ago. Me and my wife, we were staying in a little small apartment, and one of my sons came and made a joke about my wife that was very, at the time, he's just a young kid, but it wasn't the best joke to make about a young woman who has just had given birth to twins, if you get what I'm saying, right? And so I scolded him. I had a long conversation with him, and I made him apologize. We had a real conversation in that moment, and I shared with him that your mother will always have sacrificed more than your father has sacrificed for you to be here. And that has painted a picture for all of my children from a child until now. And I have one that's getting ready to graduate school. Well, he just graduated, and he's getting ready to go into college, and two more that are in high school, and two smaller ones underneath them. And they have a deep respect for my wife because every day they saw it on display. There's not a day that they can say, we saw our mother disrespected by our father. And so when I say if you don't know how to do it, it's hard to explain it, because you can tell somebody, you've heard the saying, those who can do, those who can't teach.
Mm-hmm.
I believe those who can't try, those who can do. And so there's a level of trying to explain it, trying to accomplish it until you figure it out. But it's hard to verbalize it to someone else. It's hard for me to tell you how to become a millionaire, Jeff, and I have not yet hit $1 million. I can tell you how to save your money because I understand that principle. I can tell you how to start a bank account. I can tell you how to do a lot of things that are lived experiences for me, but I cannot tell you how to reach a goal that I have not yet achieved myself.
I've always thought of it as those who struggle the most have the most to teach, as long as they've accomplished it.
That's good. That's good.
Those who just get it, it's natural to them, so they can't explain the steps. They just kind of flow into it. But those who have struggled and took this step and then this step and then this step can walk somebody else through it much better.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So your dad, to go back to your dad for a minute here. He cut Motown's hair.
Yes, sir.
Gordy, the Temptations, the Four Tops, and he made good money in the 80s. Like you were saying, six figures cutting hair. But the lights still got cut off. And as a 10-year-old, I think you said you were 10, cutting wood to keep your pregnant mother warm. So what did you see in him that you've only learned how to read now, later in life?
So I think every young man sees their dad as a hero, and you don't know the full story. I will say this to my mother and my father's credit, especially my mother. My mother never painted my father in a negative picture. So I only had the privilege of seeing him as the hero for myself. And so when we were going through many of those experiences, I did not know that he was doing well in some areas. I saw the consequences of that, but I also recognize that my dad, now that I know the stories, that I know the history, that my dad was helping people in the community all the time. Sometimes he just didn't know how to help his own family in those particular areas. And I tell people there's a level of grace that I give men because I recognize that we have experienced our own heartache, our own brokenness, but then we're held to a high level of expectation when we've experienced it to just get over it. We live in a day and age now. I'm a millennial. I don't even like using that terminology, but I am. I'm a millennial, and we are considered the healed generation in the sense where we will go to therapy, we will soft parent or gentle parent, or mix it up a little bit where there's some correction but there's still communication. My mom and my dad didn't grow up during those times, and so a lot of what he did in helping family, helping the community, and even having to put on a particular look so he could gather success and be around those who were successful. All that was painted during a time when he grew up. It wasn't something that I think he did intentionally. I think he did it, what's the word I'm looking for? He did it reactively. It's something that he reacted to based on the environment he grew up in. My dad grew up in Talladega, Alabama, moved to Detroit and started his own business, was one of the first guys to start unisex salons. He was one of the people that I told he could negotiate a cold man out of his last coat if he did it. My dad was a skilled salesman in many ways, but there was a picture of what he wanted. And hearing his story, my dad grew up in many cases, Jeff, being told that he wouldn't be an accomplishment. So he wanted the picture of accomplishment. So during those times of my struggle, I just knew we were struggling. I didn't know what the struggle came from. I didn't know the history of what he was making. And then when I discovered that, and I had the privilege and the opportunity to sit down and talk to him, he shared some stories with me that softened my heart to a lot of those situations. Because just to be truthful, our generation, we're just getting to the place now where we care about men's mental health. Mm-hmm. I can just imagine what he endured. And he was never able to actually have a conversation and communicate with someone. I'm broken in this area and I need to reorder my life and put things in perspective. And so I look at it, and they were building blocks for me. I think they were necessary because there's a tenacity that I have that I wouldn't have had if I had not experienced some of those things that I went through.
A lot of the conversations I have are about, I think what you said in terms of your father being your superhero is true. And it's hard to separate what you want to take from what you want to discard. So a lot of the conversations I have are figuring out what to discard from your father. Oh, let me reverse that for you. What did you inherit from him that you want to keep?
So I can easily say his business savvy when it comes to starting something, his tenacity to be a problem solver. My dad would have a problem. Now, mind you, I can tell you times that the lights were cut off. I can tell you times where even the gas was turned off. But I can also share times where if the problem persisted long enough, he was going to have a solution. He was going to figure it out. He was going to make it happen. And a lot of that reasoning was because there wasn't financial education back then for some business owners. And that's not to make an excuse, but you get money fast, you usually spend money fast, right? And if you're not educated on how to manage it, you can waste it. But my father had a way of starting something, it seemed like from nothing. And when I share that, I remember my dad had at one point 7, 8 barbershops in Detroit, Michigan. And most of these barbershops that he started, they came from places where people were getting ready to quit or give up or throw in the towel at their barbershop. And he'd have a conversation with them. Next thing I know, he's made a deal and he has all the barber equipment, all of the stuff, and he's starting a brand new barbershop. He was that guy that was able to create. Before creatives were a thing, he was a guy who was able to create almost out of nothing. And I have been given the privilege that if it's a problem, I can almost figure out the solution for it if you give me the time. And I can also help others figure it out. Then he had a giving heart. And I know that's almost like an oxymoron because what we endured in our own household, but I can't tell you how many families ate because of my father, how many lives were changed because of my father. He helped those go to barber college and get an education. He started people's career. And so to this day, my wife affectionately calls me Santa Claus because I cannot see a young kid or somebody who has potential not be supported. I want to be the person to take it on. I am the guy that if I was a millionaire today, I would be trying to figure out who I could adopt that needed the help to help them get the extra leg of the race that had the potential. So I inherited that from him.
I imagine you have a bit of a ways to go to grow the big white beard. You got to turn gray first.
Listen, I joke with my wife on a regular basis, Jeff. I think the grace that the Lord gave me right here, I'm light, right? All of my friends, even my younger friends, are gray. I've just achieved 3 white hairs. My wife, who is younger than me, has more grays than me, and she's like, and I mess with her all the time. I said, maybe you are really my peace, and all the stress that I get just gets transferred to you. But I finally got 3 gray hairs in my beard, and she's over there. She said, I just can't wait. Just give me a few more, but it will come eventually.
I think I got a couple of years on you. Most of the men I speak to, and probably who will hear this, they start to wake up when the marriage breaks. So it's the collapse itself that wakes them up. And that's the road I came up. Yours is a little different, though. You watched your father, you watched the men around you, and you actually made a choice to be differently without anything really blowing up to force the situation. So tell me about that road. What's harder about that, making that decision than people think? And what does, and one more layer to before you answer, what does decades of choice look like that a single crucible doesn't teach you?
Ooh, that's good. That's real good. The first one is, what does that look like? It looks like, and you know I'm a preacher, there's a verse, Luke chapter 9. He says, anyone who wants to follow after me must take up his cross daily, deny themselves, and follow after me. That's what it looks like. It's a daily decision to deny your own feelings, your own emotions, and not that you toss them aside, but that you recognize that you are sharing life and space with someone else. And sometimes there's a desire to be selfish in your decision making. And I jokingly tell my wife, I don't mind you being selfish, but I know how much I need you. I can afford to be selfish. And she's in no way a selfish woman. But I've shared that I know that I can't do this life without you. And because I've painted that picture and I've made that my mission, it helps me to daily make that decision. It's almost like going to work. And I've counseled men before and women. Now I've asked them, are you guilty of giving more commitment to your day-to-day job, your hobby, those things you love to do, than you are the person you chose to spend life together with? I didn't choose my siblings. They're just siblings. I didn't choose my mother or my father. They are who they are. And so I've had to make concessions because I did not choose them, but their title will not change. in my life. Whereas with this person that I made a conscious decision to choose, I have to wrestle with one or two different things in when I wake up in the morning. Did you haphazardly choose this person, so you have to admit that your choices are bad? Or did you choose this person and you're too lazy to do the work? That's the two places that I come to every day with decision. When we were standing at the altar, I looked at her. I said, "You know this is to the grave, right?" And she looked at me, shocked for a quick moment. Then she said, "You know, you're right, right?" And so we laughed together. Divorce never comes up. Divorce is never an option. The only option is us working it out because we're doing life together. And I share with you what one mentor of mine shared with me. He said, "We've been doing life together for so long. We've been doing life together for so long. I don't know where her stuff ends and my stuff begins." And so because of that, we have to make a decision to make it work. What's harder about it than what most people realize is that you are consistently learning and growing and changing. And so that means that the person you are doing life with is having to learn, grow, and change as well. My wife was not the same after my first son. She wasn't the same after our twins. I remember a season where she dealt with a postpartum depression after our twins. And you can just imagine, we had a toddler that was 2 years old and twin children that were babies. And so then we had just moved into the apartment that we were in. And there was a level, I remember one day I came home, and coming home, the kids were crying, screaming to the top of their lungs. And I'm worried now because I had called her and I just wanted to check to see if she needed any food or anything, but she hadn't picked up. And so I came home, I'm hearing the kids crying. She is knocked out on our bed with the pillow over her head because she hadn't been able to sleep for several days. She was so sensitive to their sound that when they turned over in the middle of the night, she was getting up. And so I remember one of the greatest pieces of advice before I got married. A young man who had been married 64 years shared something with me when we were engaged that came and reigned strong that day. He shared with me, he said, I had asked him, "How do you have a marriage so long?" And he said, "Ask her how her day was." He said, "Always remember to ask, how was your day?" And so when I came, he tells me the story of his wife, and it was a similar situation to her, except for his kids were in school. She had all of this life had happened to her that day. And he said, when I got ready to get upset about the fact that the kids were making a mess, the house was in a mess, all of this stuff, he said, I thought about my day and that my day was consistent every single day. And so he said, I picked up the kids, took them to McDonald's. He said, this is when McDonald's still had the drive-in area at the time. He said, I got them some food. He said, and I brought them back home. He said, I cleaned the house for my wife. And when she woke up finally, I asked, how was your day? When she shared what she went through that day, he said, I was so grateful I was working at the plant. And so I remember that day so vividly, and the kids were crying, all of this going on. And so after I quieted them down, got them together, I asked, how was your day? And she just shared with me that she hadn't been sleeping, and she shared with me some of her thoughts. And that day I made a decision that I would leave work for an hour every day. And I don't say this as some type of award that I'm earned, but I'm saying this for the example of how you need to grow with that spouse of yours. I would leave work for an hour every single day from the barbershop. I would go grab her something to eat. I'd have her favorite book in the car or something. I'd get home because she couldn't enjoy herself and be in the presence of the kids and get rejuvenated at that time. And I'd tell her, go into the car, sit, take a nap, eat a McFlurry, whatever you want to do it, enjoy yourself. I have the kids. And that started the process of us shifting the way that we did things, because she's done that same thing for me. But it's recognizing that you are consistently growing with somebody, and the person you married is not the same person you're going to be with 5 years down the line. That's going to be a new person, because life has changed. Life has hit them. And on both sides, we want to think that our wives are the only one changing, but we're changing. I remember I cut hair for 25 years before I retired from the barbershop and got into the maternal health sector. right? There's a different me now that my wife is experiencing than the one that she had before. And the last thing is, what does decades of decision look like? It looks like grace. When you are making consistent decisions to choose one another, you are making a decision to give that other person grace. You're making decisions to say today is not the best day. It's okay. It looks like telling that person that I'm here in the fire with you. I'll share with you something I heard the other day that blessed me. Say everyone is looking to get married for happily ever after. Nobody's looking to get married for suffering. And everyone will suffer. And someone pushed back on that and said, well, I don't want to be with, it was a young woman talking to another woman. And she said, I don't want to be with someone I have to suffer with. She said, you can't help losing your father. You can't help losing your mother. Those are times of suffering. You need someone you can suffer with. You don't just need somebody you can experience great times with. You need somebody you can suffer with. When my wife lost her father, she needed somebody she could suffer with. When I lost my father, I needed someone I could suffer with. And I think making those consistent decisions allows you to create somebody you can get into the fire with.
I have two questions that are kind of divergent from there, so I might circle back on that. Was there a point where that choice almost slipped? And I'm not talking about divorce. I know you said that wasn't an option. That's not what I mean. What I mean here is, did you ever find yourself drifting back into your father's patterns and then you had to catch it?
I'm gonna say yes and no. I'll say yes and no, and let me temper it with this. Now, as I'm older, I'd probably say it was a yes, but at the time, I didn't know that was his pattern or not. It was, I get very quiet and very focus mode when something's not in alignment or I don't like something. I'm quiet, I'm focused, let's get there. And sometimes I can become very, for lack of a better word, cold. Not cold in the way that I am mean or honorary or harsh with her, but cold in the way that when I come home, hey, how you doing? And I go back to doing what I need to do. We don't have the same fun loving conversation. So when back in 2016 started, I got hit by a car, and 2017 came. My dad was sick already, but he had taken a turn for the worse. We went up to see him, and we were also going to bury her grandfather, who was being buried in Arlington Cemetery. And there's a reason for that, because the reason I'm saying that, because they had to postpone the funeral because the ground was frozen. So I'm up there seeing my father, and I felt some type of way because as we're traveling to bury her grandfather, and this is New Year's Day, I get the call at 6 o'clock that my dad has passed. There was a level of guilt of wanting to see my father one last time that just wrecked my soul. During that time, one of my greatest mentors, my pastor, he was sick. This happens in February. It was just one of those, you've heard of a series of unfortunate events.
I have.
It was literally that. And talking about I couldn't have wrote it down in a book if I had tried. I'm talking about October, hit by a car. December, my father gets sick. January, my father dies, and we're also burying her grandfather. February, my pastor, who is like a second dad to me, he gets sick, and then there's conflict in the church. And so there was a point where I was just on autopilot. And I'll share this here. It was one of the first times that I can truly say that I can recognize when depression hit me, just being a man, because I felt like everyone could use me, but no one could help me. And the people that were close to me, it seemed as if everyone's hurting at the time and nobody really had, and I'm not saying they did, but this is how I felt, because that's what depression does, right? I felt like there was no compassion for what I was going through, because I'm getting calls from the church of funerals that I have to do while I'm having to funeralize my dad. I'm getting calls from members about issues that they're having as I'm mourning the loss of my dad, and I'm also trying to be there for my pastor, all these different type of things. And then me and my wife are not gelling because she can tell that something's wrong with me, but I'm not being vocal about what's wrong with me. Because again, We are that millennial is that in between generation. So I'm raised by people who you just put your head down and you work. You don't complain, you get it done. But I'm also in a generation that they're a little bit more sensitive to your stuff. And so what I dealt with was a wife who wanted to know, a wife who wanted to listen, but she was dealing with a man that felt like it was weak. And I remember I hit a breaking point and I just was like, I just don't know what good I am to anybody else. And when I hit that point, my wife told me, she said, you need to talk to somebody and you need rest. She said, and I don't care what you're going to do. She said, but we need you more than anybody else needs you. She said, and I don't care about anybody else. I'm telling you, your boys need you. I need you, and your daughter needs you. We need you. And it was this come to Jesus moment where, and this is the reason I say I can see me going back now as my father, because there were moments that I can tell that my father was in that place now, but no one understood. And that generation, when my mom would ask what's wrong, and if he said nothing, you left it alone, because as a man, we just pushed through it. And so I would say that was the time. But what helped me to come out of it, there was a book that I started reading called Ordering Your Private World. And in that book, he shares how he had a mental breakdown as a pastor, all of these things he was going through. And he recognized that his world was in disarray because the things he cared about most were being placed second. And the things that he used to care about those things were being placed first. And I realized I was doing the same thing. The things I cared about most was my family, but the things that I used to care for those things, I was placing above my family. And so I had to kind of reconstruct how we were doing. Me and my wife had to have conversations. We had to walk through it together. There were some times that we just had to have some come to Jesus moments, and we talked to one another, and I shared with her the hard truths of how I felt, even if they weren't true in that moment, about how she was handling it. But I had to share with her, and she shared with me. And so it helped us come back to one another better, because again, daily I'd had to pick up that cross and deny self and be vulnerable enough with her to share this broken area. And so I remember I took 2 weeks off. I did not preach. The first week I didn't go to church. I just spent time with my family. I shared with them. We went away. We regrouped. We spent time together. We spent money that I at one point would have said we weren't able to spend because of X, Y, and Z. But I realized it was necessary to get that time together. And so when we did that, it helped me to come back with a new mentality, but also to come back with a structure of how to handle it again in the future.
Looking at it from your wife's perspective, what does she see in the work that you don't?
My wife, and I can say this because she has shared it with me, my wife sees the good work. She sees the need and the necessity of the work. And sometimes she paints me better than I see myself. I have been blessed tremendously. And I share this dealing with men for years, from the barbershop to pastoring to my current position, that are sometimes underappreciated. I deal with a wife that sometimes I feel appreciates me more than I deserve. And so she looks at the work as valuable. I think we shared in our first conversation, I don't get to say, in my mind to this day, I don't get to say I'm a great father. It's the people that I get to be a father to that will determine that. My wife is a consistent reminder that I'm a great father and I'm a good man, even when I don't think I am a good man. And so I think she sees the value of the work.
When we spoke earlier, you said something I haven't heard anywhere else. You said that fatherhood advocacy starts prenatal, and it can show up as the man who shows up to the OB appointment. He's in the room when she's scared and maybe the doctor's not listening. What specifically changes? And I don't mean statistics. What is different about that man at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday that the guy who doesn't show up to the doctor doesn't have?
Trust, reliability, confidence. And I don't think men and women are as different as we really like to paint the picture. But what we required it in different ways. In my job, in my work, men look for reliability. They want to know that when you call, you're going to answer. Now, they don't always call, but when they call, they're looking for me to be someone that they can rely on. I think women are looking for the same thing, especially our children and the women that God has given us to bear our children, right? And so this is what I mean. I never missed one OBGYN appointment with my wife. Not one. We've had 5 kids. And well, let me say that. I missed one. And when I missed it, it was because I was running to get her food. And she said, babe, they're not going to pull me right in. Can you get me some food first? I promise you, you won't miss a thing. And by the time I made it back, she said, babe, it was one of the quickest meetings I've ever had. She said, I came in, they pulled me straight to the back. She checked, we're done. I said, you broke my streak, right? But it was such a reliability that she knew she had on me that when she walked in, everyone was looking for me. There's something that I take pride in that I know some men don't understand the privilege of, and I don't take it lightly. The doctor's office knows who my face is just as much as they know who my wife's face is. My kids call me and their dad, we got to get shots today. So we know you're taking the day off. There's a reliability that my kids have seen, but they've seen it because they've seen it from birth until now. And so I think that being reliable is one of the greatest, dependable is one of the greatest things that person has. And to be fair to the man who cannot make it, because I'm not saying, hear me please, I'm not saying every man can make it. What I'm saying is make what you can, be there what you can, and make the sacrifices where you can so they can see the dependability that you have when you can't. I remember, I'll share with you, Jeff, a conversation my daughter had. Now, my daughter is the hard one on me. The boys give me a little bit more grace, right? My daughter had her first big little play. And so she wanted me to go, and I just started the work that I'm doing now. And I said, well, baby, I got to work. What time does it start? And she told me the time. I said, well, let me see. I don't know. And at the time, I know if I get day off or not. And so she's moping around the house mad because her dad's going to miss her first play. My son came and said something, and he fought my battle for me, Jeff. He said, Anaya, if you don't be quiet. And that's not what he said. He said, if you don't shut up. He said, Daddy has never missed anything that was important to us. If Daddy misses it, it's because he absolutely can. And if he can, you know he's going to be there. So why are you over here acting up when you know your daddy's going to be there? And when I overheard him saying that, it made me so proud because I can't be there for everything. But my son knew that whatever daddy can be there for, he is going to be present.
What's the smallest thing that the dads you work with get wrong, even when they are showing up?
That it doesn't count.
Why wouldn't it count?
Sometimes we don't live in a society that praises our men for the small things. And they're not small, but to us and to others, it may be viewed as small. We'll go to work every day and you'll hear language, well, if you wasn't with me, you'd have to go to work. But there's a privilege in being able to be at home with the children. So if you have that privilege, just let them know that you appreciate that privilege. And it's not that it's not work. It's not that being a stay-at-home. I tell anybody, I would not have traded those years I was working and my wife was a stay-at-home mom for nothing for me to take her place. I couldn't have done the work, Jeff, but she was appreciative of the ability to be present with our kids. And so a lot of times we as guys, and I've heard them many a times, they feel like what they're doing doesn't have the same value as what the mother is doing. And so they'll do the work. And here's where I think this becomes something big. And because they don't feel like the value is there in them doing the work or is as valued as the mom's work, that if I don't do this, what does it really matter? What does it really matter if I'm not showing up for this? What does it really matter if I'm not present for this? And so I think they underestimate the value that them being the ones doing it is. It's something, and I'm not getting into stats, but I do want to share this. Rough play is in many ways directly contributed to children having tenacity and being willing to try new things because it's a fear taken away. So if I take out of my mind that me playing with my child is a big thing, I need to be at work, it's an easy throwaway. it's an easy throwaway. Well, my kids got friends. They don't need me to play. My wife plays with my son. They don't need me to play. And we remove it because we don't think it has as much value as it really does.
You told your daughter, yeah. You told your daughter every boy needs to know that he'll always have a father that will come to your rescue. And that's true until they earn the right to be the rescue.
Yeah.
And when they earn it, I won't come anymore. Those are your words, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So I want to flip that to your sons. How do you teach a boy to earn that right? And how do you know when he has earned it?
So I share with my boys, I'm probably one of the most strict dads that don't appear strict that you'll ever meet. My oldest son is dating a beautiful young lady right now. And we were talking the other day, and I said, your job is to be the example of what a good man looks like to her. I tell people we are nothing but stewards. And so I tell my boys, my job is to steward your mother. I say, I care for your mother, not because she is always the best person to care for or the easiest person to care for. It's because it's my responsibility to care for her. I said, so here it is. I said, and how you show up in one thing is how you should show up in everything. So if I can show up great in anything, I need to show up great in my marriage, right? And so I teach my boys that there's a process of getting there. You have to value that woman even when she doesn't value herself. If that's your woman. Now hear me. I'm not telling no young man to go out there and treat everyone like they're walking on a pedestal. I'm saying that if this is the person you have chosen, it's the person you desire, and they have fit the qualifications that you desire, right? And I share with my boys that they are just as valuable as that young lady. So don't just choose anybody. You can't choose her just because of looks. You can't choose her just because of body type. You have to choose her because of an all-around feature, because here it is, whoever you choose has access to areas of your life that are sacred. So I tell them how you earn the right to be that person. Ironically, I just had this conversation with my son about the young lady he's talking to. I said, she has to know that she can show you the side that is not as pretty and she still feel beautiful. She can be vulnerable and not feel as if it's going to be used against her. Me and my son have a relationship like this. He tells me about literally, Jeff, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I shared with him one day, I said, listen, I want you to know that your dad is always going to be there to hear. I said, but there are going to be moments where you're going to have to be the secret holder. She's going to have to be there, and she's going to have to share. And you're going to have to be willing to communicate, but not share the most vulnerable parts of her as y'all are getting older. I said, she needs to know that secret has started and ended with you. I said, and here's how you do that. And I shared with him some tips in doing that. I said, if it does not harm her, I said, then here it is. You don't need to share it. I said, prime example, I always tell my kids at church, I said, if someone wants you to keep a secret that you know is going to be dangerous for their health, you need to share that secret. But if someone is trying to keep a secret and it's only going to be dangerous to their ego or their emotions, you need to keep that secret. We are there to protect the person that cared enough to share with us. So that's one area. Then I tell them, listen, our job is to make the life of the person we are doing life with easier. And I tell them this across the board with friends and family, right? My friends know that if they are in need, and I have friends that I know the same, that I'm not going to see them hungry and them not have food. Take that into every aspect of your life. Are you somebody that is adding pressure, or are you somebody that is taking pressure off of that person? And so me and my son recently just had this conversation. When we were talking, I said, son, you're moving from a very unique space. And he said, what, Dad? I said, you're moving from being my big man to somebody else's man. I said, you're going to be the person they're depending on. You're officially an adult. And the reality is, in adulthood, people are going to be looking to you to help them with the decision making. And I need you to make sure your decisions don't impact them negatively. And so he has a unique blessing because he's the oldest child. So he already understands the value of his decision making and how it can impact others. So I think being the person that has earned the right is showing up again daily in that way. And I'm seeing him, I'm watching them because they are very close and she's very close to our family. I am watching them do this shift and she being vulnerable with him and she being the one that comes to him for the rescue in that moment in the ways that he can handle it. And I think when you show up in small spaces, it presents you being known to be reliable in bigger and more important spaces.
So when we spoke, we talked about your son when he turned 18. And you wrote him a letter, and in it you said, as your son, I get to tell you what to do. As my son, sorry, I get to tell you what to do. But as your mentor, I get to advise you what I think you should be doing. And I told you I was going to steal that.
Yeah.
Do you find, how is that transition? And do you find yourself still slipping? And do you find yourself catching yourself trying to be his father and not the mentor?
Yes. Long story short, yes, it's impossible because I still see my little boy. Man, listen. So we just had his graduation and we did a ceremony for him because he's homeschooled. And so in the ceremony, I just shared with him some things. And I find myself still getting emotional when it comes to him because I still see my little boy that used to walk around in my shoes. And so we were talking the other day and I wanted to fix the problem. That's who Daddy is. I want to fix the problem. And there are times where I think at this unique age of 18, I still need to be the one to help fix the problem. I think we cast our children out into this mean world a little bit too soon, completely on their own, right? But in saying that, there are moments where I have to check myself and say, okay, he has all the skill sets already to do it. It's almost like if you've ever helped your child with homework and you know that they can do this work on their own, you tell them, sit there a little while and figure it out. But if you know for a fact that they've never seen this subject or they've never done this, you might say, hey, here's an example problem for you. Well, that's where I think we are in this place. There are times where I'm seeing him have the skill set. I'll use for an example. Yesterday, he took care of his girlfriend and his sister's nails, right, for the day. And that's a move that I've done before. And I told him, I said, okay. I said, nah, your dad wants to warn you before you do this. Once you start something, you don't get to just turn it off. And so he said, I know that. He said, I've seen it before. And so his sister came in looking like just the queen of the world, right? Because her big brother is taking care of her nails. And so she's already looking at when's the next time going to happen. And he said, Dad, I said, you got to figure this one out yourself. I'm not speaking up for you because you have to manage the women in your family like you need to manage the women in your family. And there are these times where I'm giving him the opportunity and I'm telling him, listen, you're going to have to figure this path out. His job, there's been moments where recently there was an issue with one of his managers, and not a bad issue, but miscommunication. And so she asked to speak with me. And originally I said, listen, he's grown. You don't need me coming in there fighting none of your battles. Just do this. And so one day I was up there and she asked to talk to me and she shared with me some things. And when she shared with me those things, I came back to my son and I'll share with you what happened to give context to it. She shared with me that it didn't seem like he was progressing without mistakes as fast as some other people. Well, I discovered, Jeff, my son was taking the rap for some people for their mistakes because he was a new guy. It was simple mistakes, but I had to share with him. And I came back to him. I said, you can't be mad at this manager for how she's treating you because you're like, Dad, I hadn't made no mistakes. But you're allowing other people to put the blame on you. And when she sees it as the manager, she only sees the mistakes. She doesn't see that you were taking the rap for anybody. I said, and what has happened there is you're getting upset with her for doing something that she's just responding to. I said, so what I need you to do is I need you to go back in there and this is the process of what you need to do from here on out. But that was a moment where I took the reins out and I was like, he's never been in this territory before. He's never been here before. And it almost goes to giving directions, driving the person to the place, right? I gave him directions on how to get to the destination he needed to get to, but I couldn't drive him there. And I think that's what I mean when I say there's times where I am a father, but there's also times that I'm having to be a mentor. And it's a very thin line, because there's times that I want to get in the driver's seat and say, boy, sit on the passenger side. I'm gonna get you there. I'm gonna make sure you get there. But we lose the ability to gain so much when we take those challenges away from our children.
You've got 5 kids, all different stages.
Yes, sir.
I want to know what's actually transferring to them, not what you're teaching, but what they're picking up without saying a word. And I'm hoping you'll tell a story maybe about the broken down car, that it wasn't your best night, but what did you hear in that story that you didn't expect?
So with my children, I am learning more and more. They are, especially my twins, they are do as I see, not as you say. And so my twins, my daughter is a perfectionist and my oldest son's a perfectionist, where their dad and mother are perfectionists. And there are times where I get frustrated because I'm like, no one has ever made you feel like you had to be perfect. I say, I've actively made sure that you never felt that weight from me, and I know your mother has done the same. And one day, my therapist shared with me, she said, well, Steven, you can tell them that, but the last couple of conversations we've dealt with you being a perfectionist. Maybe the problem is they see daddy feeling like he has to be perfect at everything. So on the negative side, I see my children sometimes inhibiting inhabiting my ability to feel like I have to do everything right. Like I can't get it wrong. I'm the person, after I have a tough conversation, I am reviewing the conversation from the start to the finish to see what I could have done better. That is my children. But what I'm also seeing is that things that I thought they needed, they really did not. And things that I thought would be bad memories have become some of their greatest memories. And so to the story that you alluded to, last year in January, me and my wife, we are riding on our way back from a New Year's Eve service, and the car, and this is funny because we recently had a transmission fixed, but the car breaks down, and by the grace of God, we make it off the exit to the street that we are getting off on. So I pull into the gas station, and it's about 11 o'clock, somewhere around there, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. The pressure has built up and transmission blew. So I'm sitting there. I call an Uber because it's late at night, and the area we live in is a good area, but Montgomery isn't always the best area. Montgomery, Alabama isn't always the best area. So I'm like, I'm about to get my kids and my wife on home. I call the Uber to have them come pick them up. And my 3 boys, this is the first thing that I learned that they watch. My 3 boys, they say, Dad, we're staying with you. And I said, no, y'all not. Y'all are getting in the car with y'all mom. They said, Daddy, we're not trying to be disrespectful, but we're staying with you. I said, why do y'all keep saying y'all have to stay with me? And my oldest son heard this. He said, because Daddy, you will walk home if we leave. You won't walk home if we're with you, because you care more about us than you care about yourself. And in saying that, that showed me that they saw how Daddy valued them. So that's the one area. And then maybe about a year later, no, 2 years later, because I said last year, but it was 2 years because he just told me this year. 2 years later, my son was sitting there talking to me. He said, Dad, you know the funnest time I ever had? This is my twin boy. He said, Dad, the funnest time I ever had was when our car broke down on New Year's Eve. And in my head, this is a low time for me because the car breaks down. Like, life is happening. Bills are being paid. I don't have the money to fix this car, and the car breaks down. I'm thinking about all this stuff, all these problems that come with the car breaking down. He said, Dad, you bought us chips, hot cocoa. We sat there and we laughed. We were listening to music, watching a movie on the phone. It was just the best time ever. He was like, I just love spending time. He said, ain't nobody there to bother us. He said, I just enjoy it. We didn't get home that night until almost 1 o'clock. But my son told me that was his best time ever, just being with his father. Going back to what I stated earlier, with dads feeling like what they do does not count. Just your presence is more than life to those children.
Beyond the pastoring and the mental health work, what are you working on right now that nobody sees yet?
Ooh, so I'm working on a few things now. One, because I'm very passionate about leaders, I'm currently working on developing a leadership conference for restoring leaders because I feel like burnout, especially for men. And I tell people I love men and women leaders, but I feel like we are losing spaces to hold one another accountable for our mental health and for our spiritual and physical health. And so I'm looking right now at building a space to help guys not just be held accountable for their family, but also for themselves. Because a lot of times where we fail at is we will be there for family so much that we'll lose self. And then because we've lost self, we no longer know how to be there for family. And so we're working right now in the works of how we need to formulate that, what it looks like, how many days that's going to be. I've learned how to lead a new corporation, or I've learned how to have better business meetings, but I've learned how to take some time away, get refilled, go back in, and everything that I already have in my storehouse, I can utilize it properly now. The old saying about the man who had the competition with the young man who had the brand new axe versus the old man with the old axe. And the old man kept sharpening the axe, and he took time to sharpen the axe, and he had way more wood cut down than the young man who never took time. I want to create a space where men are sharpening their axes so they can utilize effectively the skill sets, the tools, the ingenuity, and the resources that they already have. And then I have a podcast called The Pulpit View. And what it does, it allows people on the back end of what it is to be a pastor or a leader. It shows a view from the pulpit to the pew. And so we share stories of how pastors have led, how they've kept families, and I do mostly men pastors. And because of this, I want to share how they have held their families together, or the regrets they have had from not holding their families together. I'll share with you, one pastor shared with me some years ago on the podcast how he wished he could undo the years that he did not to devote to the family, because now as he's older, he realizes that he's having to do a lot of rebuilding because he spent so much time focused on the church or the calling that his true calling, which was his family, he started losing sight of. And so I want to help young pastors, young men, young leaders not to make the same mistakes many of us have made in the process of leadership, where we put everything else first than the things that we care about.
I love that. That's the conversation. Stephen, I want to say thank you for showing up specific and telling those hard stories, and for the work you're doing with dads. If something in this hit you, his father advocacy work, Stephen, tell us where to find you.
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Steven_K_Garrett, or Steven Garrett on Facebook. I'm also on LinkedIn. And then the podcast is a YouTube and Facebook podcast. So you can always type in the Pulpit View and it will bring up all of our information. Please follow us on any platform that you are connected to, and we'd be grateful for you. And Jeff, let me tell you how privileged I am to have been a part of this phenomenal podcast. And I love the stories that you're telling, and I appreciate your vulnerability, because to say there's an area that I felt like I wasn't the most successful at, now I want to help brothers become better and more successful, takes a lot of hard work. So I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart that I appreciate you as well.